Well, so much of being tuned into yourself, and that's a big part, probably of your work too, I'm sure, is getting people to have a relationship with what I call the witness consciousness or the observer, this sort of objective view of yourself, where you are actually in line with what your life is doing. And when you can tune in at that level and start to listen to these cues, these whispers, these sometimes they're 2x4s over the head, I've found, that there could be some reason here behind this, that potentially there is learning for us here. And even if it is just sort of leaning into it initially, um, whether like for me, it was a physical situation or possibly it's an event where you're tremendously triggered, or there's been, uh, an episode, be it with alcohol or drugs or whatever it could be, to actually be able to step back and look at it from an objective point of view rather than just sort of getting all wound up in it and thinking that there's no purpose to it at all, at least to me, feels a whole lot more hopeful and
Mm,
as though there's a lot more opportunity for growth and learning.
mm. So, I mean, there's a lot of growth that can come. This is the thing, right? We want to heal our trauma because we want to heal it, but there's a lot of growth.
Yeah.
You strike me as someone who's had a lot of growth from theirs.
Oh.
Can you talk a little bit about the growth that can come from it?
So I live on a family property in the summertime, and I always call this family property the laboratory of my life because brothers and sisters and children and aunts and uncles, and while I really care deeply for my family, they're also high stakes. They're also the people that can affect you most deeply. And um, so I also have this timeline for having lived on this property and knowing how I would have reacted to a situation before, taken something personally, or suffered in a way that felt really, really deeply hurtful to me. And so this was one of those summers where I kind of looked back and I said, wow, that would have really affected me before. Isn't it amazing that I can, not that it stopped again, here's the objective view, right? It's like, wow, here I was, now I'm here. Isn't that great? My God, what would have maybe before taken me a week or two to process, now it's an observation, it's a recognition, and it's a release. And that's growth in my life. It's who wants to suffer? I mean, who wants to suffer for, you know, huge amounts of time? No one. No one.
Mm, mm. Could you break down that practice for me? Observation, recognition, and release. Can you kind of
Yeah,
deconstruct that a little bit? Because I kind of love that.
sure. Yes. So observation is one of the tools. I have a book called The 10 Tools, and it's this stop, look, and listen type of approach where rather than getting rolled up into the circumstances of our life, that we actually stop and say, whoa, something's happened. Something just happened. And then looking more deeply at what that possibly can be. What is it that I want to go to? In the beginning, for me, it was always blame. It was like I just wanted to blame somebody else. And now it's like, wow, there's many angles to this. And I know there's only one thing I can truly affect, and that's my own behavior. So how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to process this? And then once there is that sort of idea of processing, or wow, I got through this, there is this ability to release it and let it go. I want to say, I think it's important to say that one of the things that I've noticed in moving through trauma is that instead of these enormous triggers that were obstacles that got in my way when I had unresolved issues happen, what happens for me now is that my trauma, because I mean, let's be honest, your trauma is going to be your trauma. It's built, it's woven into the fabric of your life, right? So now what trauma is for me is it's a red flag. It's like, oh, here's one of those places. Here's one of those tender places that needs extra attention. That this is
Mm,
what and I love that. That I believe is growth too, is when we can turn towards the trauma rather than turning away from it, because we'll never outrun trauma. We'll never outrun it.
mm, mm. And so many people do try. I know I did. I know,
I did. Yeah.
right? And we've discovered that actually dealing with it is easier than running away from it or avoiding it. Do you think?
Yes. And I loved your story. I was so grateful to have the interview with you, Veronica, because you tell an extraordinary story of healing, and I'm really happy that my audience is going to have an opportunity to hear that. And um, but I really do believe that uh, we don't turn towards it because so oftentimes we don't feel strong enough to turn towards it. So the guidance that people like yourself can offer people to get to that point of being able to
Mm,
turn towards it. I don't know that it's necessarily the first step. I think it's the recognition of, wow, there is something here. And, I have to do something because I can't live like this for the rest of my life.